Welcome everyone, you're listening to Nephology, the podcast dedicated to crypto, accounting, business, finance and much, much more. I'm Joe David, the founder of Nephos Group in Minor. Please note that all conversations recorded are professional opinions, and if you'd like to know more or gain support, please reach out to the team directly. Now on to the next episode. Welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Nephos Group podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Eva today.
Hi, Joe.
Eva, how are you?
Really good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for joining us Monday morning, bright and early. Good to see you again. And do you want to just give our viewers that don't know who you are a little bit of information about you and what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm Eva Dobrzanska, Investment and Dealflow Manager at Block Dojo. So Block Dojo is an early stage startup incubator, generally for startups in the blockchain space. And what we do is that over the course of 12 weeks, we help them incubate their startups, grow their businesses, and then prepare for pitching their first pre-seed checks, which ties in very nicely with what I'm doing within the merit of my own personal brand, which is posting a lot of content out there on capital raising and helping early stage founders understand this process.
Fantastic. And what's your background? How did you get into this area?
Yeah, so I found myself in the startup space when I was living in Sydney. I finished my master's degree over there, and then I started working for an R&D tax credits consultancy, then onto a platform connecting founders with investors. At that point, I think personally, I realized that the world of capital raising is more exciting than the world of tax. So I made the move. I've set up my own company, which was a small advisory for early stage founders looking to connect with investors. That's when I started designing pitch decks for my clients as well, and moved back to UK and just continue on building on that as well.
Nice. And how long have you been at Block Dojo?
Not too long yet. I think just about 2 months.
Okay, exciting.
But definitely, oh my God, hit the ground not running and absolutely loving it.
Yeah.
The current role is sort of where a lot of the different skill sets that I've had from the different areas sort of like came together really nicely, and I really, really love that.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I guess tell us a little bit more about Block Dojo, what the kind of, I guess, key kind of component of the business is, and how you help clients, navigate this world.
Yes. So we are an incubator and investor as well. For each of the participating startups in our cohorts, we invest £10,000, and we extend a framework of support around them to help them scale and grow the businesses. So, for example, in the first week, we are validating their problem with them in the market that they found. Then we move on to help them build the MVP. We give them developers time. We help them develop the UX, the UI. We match them with mentors. We've got a network of hundreds of mentors. And then we help them prepare their pitch decks and financials to get investment ready to pitch their first pre-seed checks. So overall, the type of a founder that would derive most from it is someone who is looking to tap into that full ecosystem of support as fast as they can, because this already, there's so much out there, so much information, so much resources and so much help. But I think the challenge that founders are facing is this, what's it called? It's like decision.
Oh, I know, fatigue.
Fatigue.
Where there's so much for them
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we help with that. We just make this as easy and straightforward so that the founders can actually focus on their business.
Yeah, no, nice. I like that. And I think sometimes you see with these incubator type things, they also have their own self-interest at heart because they're always wanting something at the end. Whereas for you guys, the success is that they go and raise funds kind of externally, as it were, rather than, you're not building something up to invest in yourself necessarily, you're building something up for external investment. So for you, I guess there's much more, it's all about what they look like at the end rather than trying to do something for your own benefit, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, And then because, they become part of our portfolio, once they graduate from the program and they are at the seed level alumni, we still continue to help them. So as part of my role, I'm still reaching out to my contacts of VCs and investors to see if there are any matches that I could make.
Yeah, perfect. And for those, because I think with, especially in the kind of the crypto space, Web3 space, a lot of people, founders wise, get into it with a good idea, but they don't necessarily know all the kind of different terms and things like that we may be talking about today. So before we move on, do you want to just give people an idea? What does the funding process look like in terms of what does pre-seed mean, and what that kind of journey looks like for a business as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So pre-seed is usually the first checks into the business. And this is where friends and family round could be nested within as well. This is usually where the founders retain full control of the business still with friends and family. So they still own 100% of it. However, then as you are approaching the first structured pre-seed raise, that's when you might raise from angel investors, potentially a VC as well. However, that's less common. And then the VCs most often come at around the seed stage level. So that's where usually the startups would look to get a first VC and they can take the whole round. Some more angels as well and so on. And then obviously as you're like in Series A and B and Cs, that's when you're dealing typically with like VCs, but also family offices, corporate venture capital funds as well. So
that's through the life cycle of, as the business grows, at each stage they need to raise capital for different milestones and things like that, I guess. Absolutely. So cool. So I guess what I was really interested to talk to you about today was, like I say, we've got a lot of crypto kind of startups. We get a lot of people come to us that are beginning out on their journey, and they need advice from us from an accounting and tax and things like that perspective. But really interested to know from your side and your experience, I guess, firstly, what advice, like where do you think the real key advice is that people maybe even don't get from people that are, from VCs? Like what would you give as like key advice for startups?
Yeah, so probably it would be a quote that I've heard recently, that it takes a village to raise a startup. And this goes back to what I said earlier, this ecosystem of support. So there's so many players out there. That was actually the topic of my master's thesis, by the way.
Oh, so
when I was in Sydney, I was analyzing the entrepreneurial ecosystem of Sydney.
Oh, wow.
So, to name just a few, you've got incubators and accelerators that help you with structured programs and funding as well. You've got capital raising advisors, and there's plenty of courses out there available to help you understand how to do this process. There's angel investors, exited founders, experts in the space who could become your mentors, your advisors. There's consultants out there to help you with non-dilutive sources of funding, like tax advisors, everyone, and so on. So it can be quite overwhelming for a founder on the early stage to know where to go first, what to take care of, in what order, and what to watch out for. So my advice to the early stage founders would be to build that ecosystem around themselves as early on as they can. So actually, go out there and speak to people, learn about what they're doing. And this is really where this, extroverted energy must come in. And you really need to have this unrelenting desire to want to learn about the other people in the space and the dynamics. But the great thing about the startup industry is that I found it super welcoming and very open. So if you just ask and you tell people like, this is what I'm building and these are my current shortcomings and challenges, everyone's super willing to help, and chances are you're speaking to them, they'll be like, oh, I know someone to help you with. So I think that the main conclusion would be here to voice your problems and ask for help
and build your network, I guess. Like you say, build that network as early as you can, and I guess you never know when you might need someone or something in that network. And in terms of that, then, if I'm a founder and I've got a great idea, what's the first thing? I say the first thing I should do, but where's we talk about building that network, but what's not necessarily what's the first person I should speak to, but where would you start? What would be your first kind of point of call?
So I would be thinking about the business itself first. and thinking what is the target market that you are addressing. Are you a B2B startup working, let's say, with insurance firms, or are you a B2C product working, like selling to students? And then my advice would be to go out to your target market and speak with your potential customers first, get as much feedback from them as you can, and set up a website with a wait list. Make your contacts form on your website as easy to find as possible, and make giving feedback easy as well, because you want to raise those sound structures around you that will make it easy for people to connect with you and give you feedback, because that is pivotal at the early stages.
Yeah, okay.
You could be building the most innovative next gen product with amazing features and so on. If no one wants to use it,
no one wants it.
That's
really interesting. So the first thing you would do is go to the to the potential customers and talk to them, and I know that sounds obvious, but I guarantee, and I'm sure you know, most people don't do that. First and foremost, most people probably just start out thinking they've got the greatest idea, and
I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen, and you don't want to be a part of the statistics where 90% of startups fail. Because the research is out there. You can go on Statista, you can go on like all sorts of market research sources, but nothing will substitute for actually talking to people and learning about their pain points.
I think that's when you look at the theory, if you go to business school or university, and they teach you, whilst they do tell you to talk to focus groups, they do give you these theories around, go to this place and you can do this research, and go to that kind of paper-based research. But as you said, nothing is better than public opinion.
Yes,
and
exactly.
And that ultimately that's what matters in the end.
Yeah.
Because they're the people that are going to buy your product, whether that's B2B or B2C.
Absolutely.
And then interestingly, you mentioned about a website with a contact us kind of wait list, as it were. So that's an interesting one as well. Is that something that you advise people, and do you see that often, that people don't do that and then wonder why they haven't started to build?
Because I've heard founders will be saying oh, I'm pre-product, pre-revenue, what traction metrics can I have? Well, so setting up a wait list, and let's say you've got 1,000 people on a wait list, that is a fantastic traction metrics that should be then put into your pre-seed pitch deck.
Right.
And it's incredible, because that's potential first 1,000 users that you already have. You've captured their name, their email, and that's all you need. So it's so important to, set up those social channels as early on as you can. Even if you do not have a product yet, you can still generate some buzz around it.
Yep.
And I think that is super important for raising at the early stages.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So as you say, when you're doing that pitch deck, having that initial, like you say, 500,000, whatever, people on your kind of mailing list, as it were, is a really important thing to...
That's amazing.
Okay. That's really interesting. So what I want to discuss a little bit is a bit more about Block Dojo, but also what an incubator is and why an incubator. Why should somebody go down the incubator route rather than just going on their own and finding these different... I know it probably sounds obvious, but it'd be really useful to give people a bit of insight on why incubators like yourselves exist and the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so going out there on your own is obviously doable. And, we've seen people do it. And if you've got this, grid and you know where to look for, then absolutely go for it. I think the value of an incubator is that it will allow you to do just the same, but a little bit faster. And then in a little bit more streamlined way. The amount of people that you connect to over the 12 weeks is insane. So the extrovert energy must be on high levels. Yeah. But it's invaluable in terms of the mentorship that you get. So with us, we've got workshops happening on a weekly basis. All the startups are working together in our co-working space. So there's also potential to speak with other founders who are at exactly the same stage of development as you are. Because, the founder journey can get lonely. And so, like to be together, part of a program and a cohort that works together, we've got socials every Thursday as well. It builds this sense of camaraderie that, if you're a solo founder, you wouldn't find it, like working from home by yourself.
No, for sure.
It can get quite isolating. I remember when I came to UK and I was running my own business, I remember that I've had this thought where I realized that my range of opportunities is only limited to what I can think about of like what to Google.
You're totally right. And even now with the benefits of things like AI and ChatGPT and stuff, you've still got to, and people say that to me all the time, you can use ChatGPT for this, but again, you've got to be able, it's a really important point, you've got to be able to think about something. You've got to think of a prompt to get an answer. And if you don't know what to say or to prompt it with, same with Google, with all these things, you're not going to get an answer because you're not asking.
And there's so many moments of serendipity that can happen when you're working part of like a group, like at work, someone will be like, oh, I can't go to this event, are you free, do you want to take my space, and so on. And that's the sort of surroundings that you want to actively put yourself into to maximize the chances of success for your business. And obviously, at an incubator, this is exactly what we're trying to create.
So with the Block Dojo incubator specifically, so you have co-working space, and you offer kind of support and workshops, like you say, across the range. What would you say is the kind of key differentiator between what Block Dojo do and what othering? Why would people choose you guys over others?
Yeah, so I think the main advantage with us is that it is intensive, face-to-face, hands-on program. So it actually takes place, like every day you come in, you work together, you do this. Because I've been speaking to a number of founders who, they did a couple of like remote accelerators and so on. That doesn't really give that factor that I described earlier. I don't know, I would call it the serendipity factor. Where you're in a space and you're allowed for something to happen like this. And I think that's the main differentiator with us. And it's very intensive as well. So we ensure like that almost every single day is packed. And then during the mentor week would be probably one of the busiest week throughout the whole cohort. So it's usually in the middle of the cohort. So that's when startups will get to speak with like 40, 50 mentors, and they then can select up to 5 that they then work with. And then the other busiest week of the cohort is the last one, when we've got the investor showcases. So this is also what distinguishes us, because in the last week we've got investor dinners. And then the big showcase of the whole cohort, where you get to pitch and present to our network of investors. So usually those events attract like 200, 300 investors in a room. And
how many startups are pitching in a cohort?
Up to 10 per cohort.
So it's quite a tight-knit group as well then. Up to 10 is quite a small, but good, for good reasons, a small kind of close-knit group.
Absolutely.
And if you've got 200 to 300 investors coming and if they're looking at 50 to 100 different businesses, it's impossible for them to choose, right? But from 10... they've got a real opportunity to really focus on those and understand them.
And that's also something to consider for founders when they're looking for their, founder incubator fit. How many startups are participating in each cohort of the accelerator or incubator? Because if it's too many, you will actually be putting yourself in competition against the other startups. And something that we do with our cohorts as well is that we want to select startups that are complementary to each other, but they are not competitors.
I was just thinking that.
Yes.
So you will be selective, I guess, in the recruitment process when you're recruiting these startups into the cohort.
Absolutely, because I would love to see in our next cohort, which will start in September, is that we will be able to allow these startups to generate some synergies between them in the midst of the program. So let's say we would have a startup that is working on the, let's say traceability of food produce in the supply chain, and then another one is doing carbon credits. Could they do something together? That'd be amazing.
No, that is really cool. Okay, so we've talked about, what should an investor, what should a founder do initially? Why choose an incubator or not in some people's cases, I guess. So we've done that. We've done the journey. We've been through our intensive, course. Okay, so now we're looking at investors. Okay, so firstly, what do investors look for? What do we mean by investor ready?
Yeah, so from my experience of the early stages, we're working with pre-revenue, pre-product startups. It is hard to talk about product market fit or traction metrics. So what investors look for instead is something that I call founder market fit. And that is essentially comes down, this is what builds the strength of the team. So let's say how suited the founder is to the market that they are operating in. Do they have technical experience from it? Have they been in this sector long enough to build up a relevant network, to learn its dynamics, to learn about the competitors and what they are building? And then, with the skill sets, you want analytical minds for, let's say, fintech startups, and then more social and talkative for the consumer sector, creatives for music tech, and so on. So it's quite important that they have been speaking to their customers, as mentioned earlier, and then also have they experienced the problem themselves? Like, have they been in their shoes?
Okay.
And if you've got all them present, then that's like a really good indicator that the founder knows what they're doing and they are capable to deliver the business model.
Yeah, interesting. So on the initial stage then, the investors are kind of not just looking at the founder, obviously, but they're more looking at what that founder can do in the space than necessarily the business model or the business plan behind it. Because I guess any of us can write a business plan and
although what they look at is the viability of it. So, for example, I tend to say, and like with Block Dojo as well, we give a guideline that you should only have up to 3 revenue streams in a 5-year period.
Okay.
Otherwise, you lose focus.
Right.
And it is also important to note, are you targeting too many target markets all at once in your business model? How is this, justified? And can you actually deliver on that? Or how come you are targeting this target audience first and not another? And if a founder can justify it, that's where most of my contacts are from the previous job, so I have a clear go-to market, that's how I will execute it. So that's why, early stage pitch decks are still important. Yeah. Because they show that the founder knows what they're doing.
Yeah, they've done some research, like you say, and I guess that's where an investor isn't necessarily going to scrutinize the financials as such. We see on Dragon's Den that they initially kind of scrutinize all the numbers, which is fine. Yeah. But numbers are numbers, right? Yeah. We can all put numbers on a page, but like you say, it's much more important that the founder is a fit. And that they they've done their product market research as well.
I was watching Dragon's Den recently, and the amounts of equity they're asking for is just insane.
Yeah, it is crazy. That I mean, obviously it's a TV show, so it's a different dynamic, obviously. But you do often see, and I do think about that sometimes, where we had a client of ours that actually went. She didn't get onto the TV show, but she went to the kind of early stages of the Dragon's Den process, and the one thing that obviously as accountants we focused on was the numbers, because as an accountant, that's what I see all the time, where they tear apart the numbers and things like that. But they do every now and then, and I don't watch it all the time, but they do every now and then go, do you know what? Your business idea is terrible, but you're incredible, and you will be successful, and I want to buy into you. Do you see what I mean? And you do see that sometimes where, that the business idea might not be the best, but if the person is that good, it will really entice an investor into
absolutely. Investors invest in people. So there must be that. And another thing that I wanted to add is probably that investors don't just invest in good startups and teams, but also in high growth industries. Okay. So their sweet spot is usually, especially if we're talking about VCs, their sweet spot is to invest at the beginning of the exponential growth curve of the industry development. So that they can maximize their returns over the lifetime of their funds. So we're talking 5 years, 10 years time. And I think this year what is happening is that we are in a big year of macro headwinds and tech tailwinds. So on the headwind side, we've got high inflation, rapidly changing interest rates, geopolitical uncertainty in general, and tightened financial conditions, and that's slowing the startups down. But on the tailwind side, with tech development, like AI is surfacing huge appetite for investment.
Yep.
And the technology itself is developing so fast that there's talk about regulation as well.
Yeah.
Then we've got developments in cybersecurity and climate tech and defense that are, driving up the revenues in space tech sector. What else is big? Electric vehicles.
Yep.
So I think the stat is that last year the sales of EVs surpassed 10 million.
Wow.
And that trend is expected to continue this year as well. And that will in turn boost the supply chain of it, so battery manufacturing and so on.
And I guess I drove an electric car here today.
Yeah.
And there are actually chargers out the front of the building that we're in. The kind of the structure, if you like, of having chargers in convenient places, or and like you say, it might be a top line industry, might be electric vehicles, but then there's a load of sub industries, if you like, underneath that you might be providing. So I think that's quite important that I've seen sometimes you can see and you can research what are the, because this is a data scraping exercise, right? What are the most invested in sectors in the last, I don't know, 3 years or 4 years or whatever. You don't necessarily have to be building that top line. You could be building anything in that supply chain, if you like, up to that top, because ultimately in order to hit that goal, we need all these things underneath it. Sometimes people, I don't think big enough, if you know what I mean, and wide enough to in their product thinking.
I like that thinking. It's sort of this industry maps that you can find on PitchBook.
Exactly.
Really show
infrastructure was the word I was thinking of. So if you've got an electric vehicle, you need the infrastructure behind it. So we were talking earlier about me moving to Dubai, and I went last year, and my son and I went to the Museum of the Future in Dubai. They've got, and as you can imagine, it's all these crazy things for the future. One of the things they've got there is a road that charges your car as you're driving.
Oh wow!
So I don't know how far away that sort of thing is, but my point by that is thinking outside the box, thinking bigger picture. If you were to be, I mean, that might be too much of a crazy idea, but the point of the story is you've got to think about stuff that's outside of what's already being talked about, because if it's already kind of being talked about in the mainstream,
then you're too late.
So you've got to go that bit further, and like I say, the charging road might not be possible or whatever, but if you could build that, imagine building the motorways with charging roads.
That'd be fantastic.
You'd never have to, you never have to charge your car again. So I think it's like you say, it's that kind of spreading it a bit wider than just what's the core headlines, because like we just said, if it's on the news, it's probably too late. And I guess in terms of tips and tricks, if you like, and if you got any kind of easy wins or things like that you would recommend to founders or startups that are listening. So the first one that comes to mind, maybe not necessarily an easy win, but for networking, especially at the earlier stages, would be to start building relationships for capital raising sooner than you think. Okay.
And this could be reaching out to angel investors and exited founders in your space, but not with a cold email outreach saying like, oh, I'm raising capital, like, let's have a chat, I want you to invest in it. It would be more in the terms of, I've seen the previous startups that you were involved with or working on. I would love to jump on a call and learn more about your career history and learn more about like how the process looked for you, like in the early stages.
Yeah.
So more like a generic chat and so on. And that first touch point, that first conversation, don't ask for anything. You don't need anything. You're just having this chat. It will be completely different when in 3 months' time you reach out to them again and it's like, oh, so we're actually raising. Can I tell you more?
Yeah, okay. And they've
it's
already
a game
heard
changer.
of you, and do these kind of these founders that have left, exited their businesses, whatever. Are they open to these? Like, do they want to have these conversations with startups?
My experience has been that yes, as I said earlier, the startup industry is quite welcoming and and open to it. Obviously, everyone goes through like the different motions of like busy periods with their
Yeah,
work.
for sure.
So yeah, they want.
And
always...
some will be more interested than others, of course. But you do find that, you know, it is worth doing and trying and you know, and I guess hoping that they are interested, because some are.
Yeah. And I probably wouldn't be me if I didn't plug it in there to also post on LinkedIn, post on Twitter, and like put yourself out there, put your brand out there.
I was going to say, let's quickly touch on that personal brand, because both of us are kind of are pushing our own personal brands in different ways, and obviously by pushing your personal brand, you also push either the business you work for or the business that you're founding.
Yeah.
So how have you found building your personal brand?
Really good. So at first it was daunting, and you know, like when you push out a couple of first posts, you're thinking like,
is anyone going to like it?
Like no one's going to read it, and like, what the hell am I even talking about? But then, you know, it starts to snowball and so on, and I think now I'm glad to say that I'm at this point where like it's really bringing in like benefits, and it's so nice, because so many of my industry friends and like people that, you know, like us each other as well, like we've met through that. Yeah. And it's also a completely different conversation sometimes when I'm jumping on calls with investors, and they will tell me like, oh yeah, I've seen your posts. So they've got this mental link already, and
building credibility as well, isn't it? And an understanding of what you, and as much as, you know, it's a bit like being on camera. You know, being on camera is never easy. I find these a little bit easier because we're not kind of looking at the camera, we're more talking to each other. But, you know, especially if you're recording yourself doing videos, or because videos are a much better way of getting your message out there. But, you know, it can be daunting. But, and I kind of, it's a really stupid example, right? But sometimes I liken it to when you go to the gym, right? And you go to the gym and you're worried about what weight you're lifting, thinking, well, everyone's going to look at me and think that he's lifting this really small weight and he must be really weak. And actually, nobody cares.
No one cares. Exactly. They're too busy.
They're focused on what they're doing and getting value out of what they're doing, whether that's in the gym or online, right? And if they get value from your content, nobody really cares how you, not how you come across, but do you know what I mean? Like how you, you know, how you, if you're not great at recording videos, nobody necessarily cares about that if the point you're making is interesting and things like that. So I find that as well sometimes, that, like I say, take that gym analogy of don't care what's going on around you, put your blinkers on, obviously take feedback, but just get out there and post. Yeah.
And also what's kind of like a reassuring thought to it is that, you know, like even if you, I don't know, like you push out a post and, I don't know, let's say it doesn't do well, or you said something stupid and someone points it out in a comment, and then you're like, oh my God, so embarrassed, right? But in a week's time, after you've pushed out 3 more posts, no one will remember that. This gets buried down on your feed and everyone moves on.
Yeah, it's true. And I think also own that as well sometimes. You know, if you have put something out there that somebody questions or what have you, I think then going on that, not ignoring it, going on it and responding to that comment in a positive way or, you know, whatever it may be, but, you know, kind of addressing the point sometimes as well is.
And it's good for connection making too. You know, whoever pointed it out, like you can respond to them like, you know, like, I didn't know that. Can we jump on a call? Can I learn more?
Yeah.
It's, you know, you can spin it in like a really good way. Another thing that I wanted to add is actually on term sheets, because that's been the topic that I've been recently very, very much doing a research on, especially for early stage founders at this pre-seed level. My best advice to them would be that when they receive their first ever term sheet, run it by a couple of people first, and it is really, really worth taking their time to do so. So if they've got an access to a lawyer, fantastic, do that. If not, then founder that is in a similar space that has been in their shoes would be great, or one of their advisors, one of their mentors,
someone like you.
Incubator and so on. Exactly.
That's really interesting, because I guess that's also where people can fall down, is they don't understand necessarily what they're signing. They're excited about the money that's coming their way. Sign on the dotted line, and then all of a sudden they're in a position they don't want to be in.
And, you know, you don't know how good or bad the deal is until you see a comparison.
Exactly. And I guess people, and I mean this in a nice way, but people just see the figure, which might be, let's say it's £1 million that someone's investing into the company. People just see the word £1 million and go, oh, that's interesting. That will help me get to where I need to get to. and sometimes don't see what the conditions of that £1 million are.
Exactly. Yeah. And, what terms are standard and normal to be expected in early stage term sheets, and what are some of like the red flags. There's so many fantastic resources on Founder Catalyst platform. Yeah. So Sam, he recently posted the toxic term sheets article on Founder Catalyst. I absolutely love it. It's just like a gold mine of information.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Okay, maybe we can dig that out and add it to the description of the podcast, so that people can look at themselves. But I think that's interesting as well, because I can look at term sheets myself, and having been in business for a while, seen a lot of stuff, I can make comments, but I don't always know what is standard and what isn't standard. And sometimes I do caveat that with clients. Sometimes when I'm looking at it to help them, I'm kind of like, look, that to me is a red flag, but it might be that actually in this case with this VC, that's the standard thing that they do. So then it's up to you whether you want to take money from them or not. So like you say, look, talking to people that see them day in, day out, lawyers as well. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course.
It's been really interesting to understand a bit more about what Block Dojo do, and I know that this will add a lot of value to a lot of our clients that are talking to us about raising money and creating these great things. And I think from our side, and I said it on Wednesday when we saw each other, that for me it's about kind of building proper businesses within this industry now, and allowing founders to really grow something special, and not grow something with all good intentions, but not have that support network around them. So it's really good to have someone like yourself with the experience you've got to help people at this stage. So thank you for coming on. So if people want to reach out to you or to Block Dojo, where can they find you?
My LinkedIn is probably the best, and also our website, blockdojo.io. It contains everything about the program, and also the link to apply naturally. So the two best pointers there.
Perfect. We'll link all that in the show notes. But Eva, thank you so much for coming, and look forward to speaking to you soon.
Yeah, and we will on the webinar.
We will. Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Amazing.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.